Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Flashback to the Track podcast. As always, we are presented by Blue Emu for maximum strength, pain relief. If you're tired muscles and joints, trust Blue Emu. I'm James, that's Mark. We're here, we're back. Apologize for the little break, but Mark and I were very busy. Mark, where were you at last, man?
I was in Mid-Ohio at the illustrious Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course for the IMSA Acura Super Duper, whatever it's called, weekend. So that's where I
challenge. Yeah.
I was like the Acura Mid-Ohio Challenge presented by the TLX Type S or something like that. So
that's a car I'm not going to buy. I'll tell you that much.
I think I got it right. No.
Can't beat my STI.
So that was where I was. And you were shooting the roundy round racing?
Yeah, I went back and forth. I went to Nashville one weekend, got to go to the fairgrounds. That was amazing. Love that place. If that track could talk, man, I'm telling you, that track could talk. It'd have some great stories. It'd really be interesting to see how the renovations will look after seeing it now in its like current state and seeing those renderings for what they want to do. Hopefully they can pass that and hopefully Nashville gets a second berth with SMI. Then I headed over to Dover. That was pretty cool. Both events were ARCA East. And man, Dover was crazy. There was a lot of tire wear. General tires were just not holding air, unfortunately. Green racetrack, but it was a really cool race. I thoroughly enjoyed Dover, but would like to go back. Got to see Miles the Monster. You get a really good perspective too, because like, there is still a little bit of old school aspect to Dover. It looks very modern with the way it's been designed, but the fact that the pit wall itself, I'm not kidding you, Mark, it's like 2 feet tall and it's like almost guardrail, basically, the pit wall. It's like still OG. That's kind of cool. It was really interesting to see that. So highly recommend both those tracks for our fans if they're listening. If you've ever been to either one, definitely kudos to you.
A lot of folks that were at Mid-Ohio actually jetted straight off to Indianapolis for IndyCar. And we're going to do a little chatting about IndyCar today, but we're also going to chat about NASCAR. It's the month of May. Exactly. It's the month of May. And, we're very excited for the Indy 500. I'm very stoked to watch it this year. We got bumping is going to be back. We're going to have more than 33 cars. So that's going to be cool. Really great entries this year. Cool one-off entries. I really like the drivers that just do Indy every year. I think that's such a cool thing to have you a feather in your cap. I'm an Indy only driver. I drive one race a year to the Indy 500. So it's kind of cool. Guys like Jared Hillebrand and Sage Karam and Simona Di Silvestro is back, which is really cool. Big fan of hers. So we're gonna talk about IndyCar and we're gonna talk about NASCAR because who doesn't love when two things combine? Like Reese's peanut butter cups, James. Peanut butter, chocolate together. NASCAR, IndyCar together.
Unless you're allergic to peanuts, we apologize if you're allergic to peanuts. It must suck.
Yes.
That
must be terrible for you.
But yeah, it's not just IndyCar drivers. It's technically they were Indy cars, but drivers that were competed in kart as well, Formula One, open wheel in general. We're going to talk about open wheel drivers who also happen to compete in NASCAR, but mainly their backgrounds were in open wheel racing, right, Mark?
Mostly American open wheel racing. We're not going to talk about all the F1 guys that have tried NASCAR. We're just going to sort of go over the more the guys that sort of came up the really prolific ones that came up through the US based open wheel series. So
yeah, and drivers who
I
was just going to say drivers who probably either won a race in NASCAR or competed full time at least for a season or two.
Yeah, not all the one-off guys. If we did every one-off guy, we'd be here forever, like Pappas and all those dudes.
10-hour podcast.
All those guys. Yeah, so we'd be here forever. But, so throughout NASCAR's history, there's really been a lot of guys that have done open wheel and then tried NASCAR. And, back in the glory days of NASCAR, James, in the 60s and the 50s, it happened a lot. Because back then, guys would just drive whatever they could find. And they just love to go race. And guys like Jim Hurtubise ran 50 cup races, but he's no more known for his IndyCar stuff. But we're going to head on some of the big ones. And really the first one I want to talk about is Dan Gurney. So Dan Gurney is the all-American racing legend, right? He's one of the greatest racers in American road racing history. He raced in F1, NASCAR, IndyCar, sports cars, anything with four wheels, Dan Gurney would drive and win in. And so he was actually racing in F1 before he even like raced in IndyCar and USAC as it was referred to as the time. We'll use IndyCar as like an overarching term. So if we're confusing everyone with that, but like, I don't know, it's weird. There's been so many different IndyCar series. I'm making air quotes right now if you're listening. So he won 4 Formula One Grand Prix and 7 races in USAC. But between 1962 and 1980, he made 16 starts in the Cup Series. So he won 5 times too. So he won a third of his starts all at Riverside. So Dan ran mostly road courses. He did run in 3 Daytona 500s, but he was the master of Riverside. His best finish in the Daytona 500 was a 5th in 1963. He was driving for Holman Moody, the Ford team, with I think they had some factory backing back then, James. I think they had some help from Ford back then.
Yeah, that was back during like the true, stock car era. And, you talk about golden era of like NASCAR. That to me is one of the golden eras because you had this really big manufacturer influence in there. So, even Ford probably was like, we need Dan Gurney in the car. And, he would be with teams like the Wood Brothers, Holman Moody, and Holman Moody was one of the biggest Ford factory teams of that era. Holman Moody even raced at Le Mans, preparing, I believe, a GT for Ford as well. That's how ingrained they were in the manufacturer and in racing with Ford. So, they put them in really great equipment. And that's the hugest thing. Like when, we're going to talk about another person on the list later on, but when the manufacturer has a say, normally the team has to abide by it. And they gave Dan some really great stuff. And, like you said, he's a king of Riverside. Riverside is like a classic road course. So beautiful with its elevation changes. And I just love its tight turns. And he was truly a master in that race. And most people will remember, if you've ever seen a picture of Dan Gurney at Riverside running that 121 Wood Brothers car, really cool to see 3 digits on a car for
3-digit numbers. Bring them back. 3-digit numbers. Let's do it.
The first one that's going to be banned is 666. It's like how 69 isn't really in NASCAR anymore. But
I just want to run a 888 like Craig Lowndes in supercars. I just want to run a 888. But yeah, Dan Gurney actually, he only ran at 3 tracks in NASCAR. He ran Daytona, Riverside, and Atlanta once. So Dan Gurney, the king of Riverside, and yeah, very limited NASCAR, just the 16 starts, but still like to win 5 times is pretty remarkable considering who he would have been up against as well in that era. So
yeah, he definitely had the handle on Riverside, and it made a lot of these other drivers step up their game. And he probably helped elevate what kind of car teams would actually bring to road courses back in that era.
And so up next we have another. Sorry, go ahead, James.
Oh, I was just gonna say, up next we have a Jones, because we'd be Jones in here, but it ain't Eric Jones, man. See, actually, it's funny because he's not even related to Eric Jones at all. It's Parnelli Jones. Isn't that the PJ Jones is his nephew, correct?
I think it's his grandfather. No, isn't Parnelli Jones his dad?
Might be. We might be way off on
It's
this.
fine. I'm Googling it right now.
I mean, PJ Parnelli Jones.
His father is Indianapolis 500 winner, Parnelli Jones. Yes. PJ Jones is the son of Parnelli Jones.
And it's clever that his name is PJ instead of Parnelli Jones Jr. I think that's
Jones Jr.
It's I feel like it's clever just to be called PJ Jones. But yeah, the father of PJ Jones, Parnelli Jones, another open wheel legend from the US. What's interesting, Mark, too, is and most people forget about this. He actually raced in stock cars before he actually got an open wheel, but he was actually running in USAC stock cars. USAC had a stock car division back in the day, and he competed in that. He also competed in midgets as well. And throughout the 1960s, I mean, that was some pretty crazy time period. Can you imagine going back and forth between USAC stock car racing and NASCAR stock car racing?
Baller. I feel like I wish we had more of that now.
Yeah,
more
right?
of this diversity.
Like an actual
now
series that competed with NASCAR that was kind of on the same level.
Yeah, because we don't have ASA anymore or any of those other series, right? Or ARCA is just a feeder series now.
ARCA is NASCAR, so yeah,
now it is NASCAR. So.
It is NASCAR, yeah. So
ARCA is NASCAR.
So it's interesting because Parnelli Jones raced, like you said, in NASCAR before he really got into IndyCar. He actually made his debut back in 1956. And he made a total of 34 starts in the Grand National Series. We're not talking about the Xfinity Series. We're talking about the Cup Series back when it was called the Grand National Series. And he won at Riverside back in 1967. I feel like Riverside was that track that if you were like an open wheel ringer, if you didn't win at Riverside, you didn't flex enough muscle and you didn't do your job right, because it seemed like the ringers would come out to play when the series headed west for Riverside. And if I'm not mistaken, was this when Riverside was still the first race of the season?
Yep, it was before the Daytona 500.
Yeah.
Which is funny when people are like, NASCAR can never move the Daytona 500. It has to be first. I'm like, back in the day, it was not first. It was like the third race.
Yeah. It could still be the biggest race of the year and just be the second race, you know. And you know, back then too, you know, they would actually count points from the qualifying races towards the season points. So, you know, like technically it was like the third or fourth race of the year, or second or third race of the year, so, or third or fourth race technically. So yeah, it's interesting era, man. It's crazy how things have changed, and yet people forget about these small bits of history. And, you know, once they're reminded of it, then it like changes their tone about a specific feeling or kind of dying on a certain hill. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. I'm with you there. Next up, James, though, this man needs absolutely no introduction.
But you're going to introduce him anyways.
It's Mario Andretti. So arguably the greatest racing driver of all time, you know, Mario Andretti. And he's raced in every type of car you can possibly imagine. He was the 1969 Indy 500 winner. He won the 1978 Formula One World Championship. And of course, he's a Daytona 500 champion. He made just 14 Cup Series starts, but he did win NASCAR's biggest race in 1967, also driving a Holman Moody Ford. And yeah, so same sort of deal as Dan Gurney, I assume. You know, let's put Mario in this car. Ford wants Mario. Let's give him a great car. Goes on, wins the race. And like I said, only 14 starts. Final start came at Riverside in 1969. So a very short career in stock car racing. But I think at this point, he's still the only guy that's won a Daytona 500 and an Indy 500. Yeah. Sorry, AJ Foyt. Him and AJ Foyt are the only two.
Did AJ win a Daytona 500?
Yes, AJ, 1972, I think, or 71.
Okay. Yeah.
We'll get to him. Don't worry. Yeah.
It's okay. No, it's interesting with Mario's Daytona 500 win, because, you know, back that interesting story I alluded to earlier, back when he was in the Daytona 500 that year, there were two other Holman Moody entries in that event. And Mario wasn't supposed to have the best engine. So he fought. I don't know how exactly he fought or conned his way into getting the best engine, but he did. And it was mainly just because he was standing his ground. He didn't want to just play second fiddle. He didn't show up just to ride around. He wanted to win the Daytona 500. And I don't know how he got that better engine, but he did. And he was able to go on and claim the victory. And it's great to see him. And it's like interesting. This is in a period when he ran NASCAR. This was before Formula One, Mario Andretti. So he got to do so much before stepping into the world stage and going to Formula One.
It's before he won the Indy 500 too. He didn't win that till 69. So
yeah,
the Daytona 500 was the first huge race he won.
Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, not that it is career suicide, but it almost could have labeled him as a stock car racer. You know, you think about the rest of the world. I don't know how seriously the Daytona 500 was taken, but like nowadays, like, you know, Daytona 500 champ, you walk in the bar, everyone buys you a beer. You know, back then, I don't think it was as significant. It was big, but not with the pedestal that it is on today.
Especially being like an Italian-born driver, coming and winning the Daytona 500. Now, as much as, fun fact, Mario Andretti does race under the American flag internationally, and he is referred to as an American F1 champion, but he was born in Italy. He's an American immigrant, but he's adopted the U.S. as his home country. So he's our adopted son, Mark. We love Mario Andretti. Exactly. Other fun fact about Mario Andretti, he was the Grand Marshal at Sebring last year, and he was doing an interview, and I was taking these dope photos of him, like zoomed in right on his face, where you could see like the age and you could see like the years of racing on him. And it was just, the photos looked so good. And I wiped the card before I transferred the photos. So,
well, Mark, good news for you. I got some photos from when he was at the Charlotte Roval when I went a couple of years back, and I actually got a picture with him. It was really nice. Kaylin let me take a photo with him. And, you know, I got to say about that man, he understands what he's doing. He knows that he's done everything in racing and that everyone wants to have a moment with him. And he is so kind to give everybody a moment with him. And you just got to think a man like that. He could just go sit off in his winery, not show up to the track, stay out of the limelight, but he constantly tries to not only go out and make face, but also be an ambassador for racing. So kudos to Mario.
And also pet pigs. He said pet pigs. That's been his thing. So,
Kalen
fun
really
fact
wants a
about
pet
Mario.
pig. So
now we have to go to Mario Andretti's arch nemesis.
Super Tex.
Super Tex.
AJ Foyt, Mr. Copenhagen, chewing up that chew. Now, we know Mr. AJ Foyt as a 7-time IndyCar champion and a 4-time Indy 500 winner, but he has made numerous starts in NASCAR. In fact, the most out of anyone on this list, if I'm not mistaken, Mark.
The most out of any of the golden age guys, like the 60s, 70s guys.
Yeah, we're going to get into a notable that is going to make more starts. But yeah, in this era, he made more starts than any of the other previously listed drivers. AJ, of course, he's one of the most versatile drivers in motorsports history. He's raced it all from Le Mans, Indy, Daytona, Talladega. He's done everything. And it's crazy because throughout the time period, he made 128 Cup starts between 1963 and 1994. And he kept attempting races even after 94. And he was successful in his efforts. He won 7 times. He won the 1972 Daytona 500. And he was able to become the second driver to win the Daytona 500 and the Indy 500 alongside with Mario Andretti. Most importantly, AJ started his own NASCAR team in 2000. And that always blows my mind, man, because, yeah, he had his IndyCar team, I believe, with Billy Boat as a driver and Conseco as a sponsor. Conseco really wanted to get into NASCAR. So they convinced AJ, and he ran supposed to be Mike Bliss for the first year. There was a falling out after about the second race. And then you had, I believe he had Dick Trickle, and then finally Rick Mass was the full-time driver in that car. And then Ron Hornaday became the driver. And then it was like Mike Wallace and Stacy Compton in 2002 before, unfortunately, Larry Foyt just drove what was left of that team in 2003. Man, it was kind of a dark period, man. All I remember is just Larry not making races. And if he was making races, that team was just not as competitive as they were the previous 3 seasons.
I remember PJ Jones driving that car at Sonoma, the 14 with the
2002
number font, the Harris car. Yeah. And like AJ did have like his own NASCAR team for a lot of years, but they finally went like full time in 2000 and he hired a different driver. Like they were like, they'd run a couple races a year, like whenever he wanted to race.
Yep. Always under the number 14 as well.
Number 50.
Yep.
Yeah. And he made his final Cup Series start at the Brickyard 400 in 1994, which is so cool because it was NASCAR's first ever race at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So somebody that's so synonymous with Indy to make their final NASCAR start there is pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's like how you're mentioning, like, you know, you got the Indy 500 guys who only just show up for the Indy 500. He kept coming back and attempting to qualify for the Brickyard, even though he wouldn't make the field. It just also showcased how ultra competitive and how stacked that race was. I mean, I think a lot of it was prize money. I mean, you want a piece of that purse, you know, so if you qualify and you get a little bit of that chunk of change. So
it's like $130,000 to finish last or something like that. So yeah, you want that money.
It's a good payday, especially back in the mid 90s. So yeah, AJ Foyt, it's really great to talk about him on this list. And, you know, like we said, you know, back to Parnelli Jones, PJ Jones, he drove that car 2002 at Watkins Glen. I think he got a top 5 finish that day. That was the race Tony Stewart jumped that restart. Everybody remembers that, but they keep forgetting that Parnelli Jones was in that race and finished top 5. So, you know, that was good efforts, good times. Leave it on a good note. All right, we'll get back to the podcast in just a moment, but first, how about a little word from our partner at Blue Emu? Now, Mark, dude, after going to Nashville, I threw out my back on Monday. I don't know what I did wrong. I was stretching or something. I pulled a muscle on the right side of my back, and it left me like Hank Hill from that episode when he tried to lift up the propane tanks and he has to go on workers' comp. I was hunched over like that, kind of paralyzed throughout the week, and it was pretty bad. Now, luckily, I had an inversion table here, and it was able to provide me with a lot of relief, being able to go and be inverted and try to separate some of that disc pain and also just working that muscle out. But, you know, after a few days, I finally got better, but I still had some discomfort. And that's where I started working in the Blue Emu, man. Because, you know, when you have a little bit of that pain from the tired, sore muscle, you rub a little bit of that Blue Emu Maximum Pain Relief Cream on there, works wonders. And in fact, it was able to make me, you know, go to Dover. If I didn't have that in my arsenal, in my pocket, I don't know what I'd be doing, man. It really helped soothe that tired muscle.
Man, that sucks. Like, you actually like threw your back out. Wow.
Yeah.
You weren't lifting propane tanks though, were you?
No, I was like just stretching. I guess I stretched weird, you know, and I kind of like came up and I was touching my toes and I twisted, and I what I should have did was just went to the floor and touched my toes while I was sitting down, and that would have probably helped a little more. But, you know, my own fault and my own worst enemy in that regard. So, but you know, thanks to our partner with Blue Emu, because, you know, they hook us up with some really amazing products. But, you know, these products are everywhere, and I'd highly recommend checking it out. Go to your local pharmacy, go to your local super center or grocery store. You can find Blue Emu. I've seen them at a lot of major retailers. And they can even order it online too. We don't have a promo code, but, you know, it's great because what Blue Emu does for us is not only do they help us with our maximum pain relief, but they also help us with our podcast, because they see that we're two passionate dudes who love motorsports, and they're passionate people who want to keep people pursuing their passions, whether that's keeping them relieved with pain relief from their tired muscles and joints, or just supporting guys like us. It's really great to work with a company like that and to have them in not only my back pocket, but on my back, if you know what I mean. That's back to the podcast.
So we talked about the good golden era. Now we're going to go into the 80s and the 90s of like IndyCar guys coming to NASCAR. And these are some really interesting ones because a lot of them became full-time NASCAR drivers, not dabbling. And the first one we got to talk about, James, is Tim Richmond.
The man, yes. Hollywood Tim Richmond, man.
Tim Richmond came from IndyCar. People forget that, man. People never talk about it enough.
No,
but
yeah.
You might not be aware that.
He came from USAC, man. That's the thing. Like he started in on the dirt, dude. Racing midgets, doing his thing, and then to your point, he came up to IndyCar and he made some pretty good starts, man. Most notably, I remember him for that Indy 500. He ran and then he couldn't make it across the finish line, and then he like jumped on some dude's car and like rode across, like patted him on the helmet.
Yeah, so he finished 9th, ran out of fuel on the last lap, and then Johnny Rutherford gave him a ride back to the pits. So the footage is in the Tim Richmond to the Limit documentary that ESPN 30 for 30 did. That's where I remember seeing.
Highly recommend watching that film. That's
it's really well done.
The same director that did that did Days of Their Lives, which was another NASCAR documentary, and there's a small 10-minute portion of that is dedicated to Tim Richmond, and it's beautiful, but the entire 30 for 30. And you get to know a little bit more about his open wheel background. And it was interesting. His mother wanted him to get out of IndyCar because he had a really bad wreck at the Michigan 500. And it looked bad. If you actually watch that documentary, car's like cut in half, man. It's like, geez, Tim could have died that day, or could have been paralyzed. His racing career could have ended. So it was a good thing that he got out.
Yeah, and so he ran some IndyCar race in 1980, and then he made his NASCAR debut later on in 1980 with DK Ulrich. He raced part-time for a couple of years in NASCAR, just sort of trying it out. And then 1983, he went full-time with Raymond Beadle. And then, of course, like we know him best for like his time with Hendrick Motorsports, driving the 25 Chevy, the Folgers car. That's what we know him best for. Won 7 races in 1986, finished 3rd in points. In 1987, he missed the first 11 races of the season, but due to illness. But he returned mid-season, ran 8 races, won twice. Actually, won his first race back after sitting out those first 11 races.
First 2 races back. Yeah, he came out. And
won. Riverside and Pocono, right?
And they're 2 completely different tracks, so you kind of race them the same. But it just showed that like Tim Richmond didn't lose anything from his time off, and he knew what he had to do around Riverside, because once he got, even when he was with Raymond Beadle and that Blue Max racing team, he was a strong contender at at Riverside, but also too, he was good on the short tracks. He was a well-rounded driver. And it was something you kind of didn't really see in NASCAR at that time, someone who could do it all. And that was Tim Richmond. And we all know unfortunately, he passed in 1989 due to the HIV/AIDS virus. And, his legacy does live on in multiple facets. Of course, the documentary we spoke of, Tim Richmond to the Limit, Days of Thunder, the influence of that film was Tim Richmond. Cole Trickle is Tim Richmond. Fight me. I will I will defend that till the day I die. And
it's pretty well known.
Pretty well known, yeah. Some people want to say, "Oh no, that's Dick Trickle." Like, you're trying to make a joke. It's not. And also, he was one of NASCAR's 50 greatest drivers, and that's a well-deserved honor for him to have. For the short time he was in NASCAR, he had such great success, and he changed the game, and he really was a larger-than-life personality, man. Like,
I think had he not passed away when he did, I think we would have been looking at him right now as the greatest driver in NASCAR history.
100%. I don't disagree with that at all.
He would have won multiple championships, 50 some races. Like he was amazing.
It's funny because I posted about that this week, because his final victory in NASCAR came at Riverside in 1988, and when he 1987, and when he won that race, it was a big deal because no one knew what was going on with him, and he was just doing him. And it's crazy, all these years later, everyone in the comments was looking back and saying, what could have been, man. Jeff Gordon wouldn't have had 4 titles. Dale Earnhardt wouldn't have had 7. I'm like, these are all true. Tim Richmond would have changed the game, and what could have been, though.
Up next, we've got the guy we love talking about, John Andretti. Check it for Andretti, folks.
Check it for Andretti. Mr. John Andretti, like Uncle Mario. John is also another super diverse driver. He has a really great array of talents running in IndyCar sports cars. He even ran a top fuel dragster. Taco Bell top fuel dragster, went rounds and did really good. He only had 1 kart victory at Surfers Paradise back in 1991 on the street course. And in 1993, he started to dabble into NASCAR. He drove for Tex Powell, and through the next 17 years, he spent his time in stock car racing. He really forged his own path, and it wasn't just because he was an Andretti. He could have really fallen back on his last name, but he was serious about trying to break into NASCAR, and he dedicated himself just to stock car racing. Notably, we all know him for of course, being the first ever driver to compete in the double. Amazing to see that. I think there's a really good documentary from NASCAR History Man on YouTube about that. That kind of dives a little deeper as far as the whole day of events, which is great. Throughout his career, he made 393 starts. And he drove for some pretty iconic teams. Hagan Racing, of course, Petty Enterprises, Cale Yarbrough Racing, both organizations which he captured victories. And in his final years in Cup, he drove for DEI as well as PPC. So, he won in Daytona 97, like I said, with Cale Yarbrough. Of course, he gave Richard Petty what would be his final victory for quite some time. Final victory in the 43 for quite some time as well, when he won at Martinsville back in 1999. And just such an iconic driver, super well-diverse, well-rounded, well-liked, and really crazy to think about how John really started to do things differently, being able to try to do the double and seeing that is a possibility, and competing in NASCAR and saying, hey, you can be an open wheel guy and forge a path in NASCAR if you're truly dedicated and you love it. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, John's great. I love looking back at John's career, and he kind of gets slept on a little bit as a very serious driver, because if you look back at his career, even his points finishes are really impressive considering the level of talent that he had to race against. Mm-hmm. If you finish top 15 in points in Cup in the 90s, that's remarkable, because the level of talent at the time, I was doing some research for an upcoming video on that, and I was looking at all these finishes in the 90s, my God, you'd have 9 top 10s and finish 9th in points, because there were so many good teams, as long as you're getting those top 15 finishes, you were doing pretty good. So, it was a tough time.
Yeah, it's just like investing, man. It's all about compounding that interest. And in this case, it's compounding points. And when you have a full season championship, there's no way to manipulate the points or reset things. you have to be good throughout the year. And you kind of look back and you're like, finished 30th here or finished 20th here. And like, that's a lot of points, especially when positions were like worth 5, 4, 3 points a spot.
It's all about buying Bitcoin, James. That's what it's all about.
No, dude, that's bad for the environment, which is ironic for coming from racing people. That's bad for the environment. Anyways, let's talk about your favorite driver.
Let's talk about the man.
The myth, the legend, Robbie Gordon. That's right.
Gordon.
It wouldn't be this list without Robbie Gordon, man. Come on.
Oh, yeah, of course. We have to have Robbie Gordon. And he's raced everything. Baja, IMSA, IndyCar, NASCAR. He's done it all. And, you know, he ran many series at once as well. And he did run a few cup races in the mid-90s, say in early 90s. He made his first start in Daytona 500 in 1991, driving a public-sponsored car.
Junie Donlevy, yep.
Yeah. And he was actually the fill-in driver for the Talladega race after we lost Davey Allison. Really interesting driver to pick to fill in, but that was when he was driving full-time in IndyCar for AJ Foyt. Ran kart throughout the 1990s, but in 1997 he decided to make the switch from to NASCAR. He signed with Sabco to race Coors Light car for Rookie of the Year. He was kind of becoming disillusioned with the Ford program and kart. He was really unhappy with the engine program, had a lot of engine failures in 96. There's that famous video of him kicking the Ford's single. He claims he was kicking the engine cover, not the Ford logo, but Robbie,
he hit the banner on the wall. How do you deny? No offense, Robbie. There's video evidence, but then again, he has denied video evidence in the past. So
yeah, he had a brutal season in 97. Really didn't do very well. He was injured for part of it. He had sustained some injuries doing the double in the Indy 500 in 97, which I believe was the first year he did it.
Yep.
And drove a Sabco, entered IndyCar.
Yeah, and that was interesting that with that whole double, because the Indy 500 rained out, and then he had to go back to Charlotte and run the 600, and he came back that Monday, and I think he was moving up to second at that point, and I don't exactly know how the fire happened, but like the fire, basically the car.
It was just classic Robbie Gordon luck. His car's burst into flames, and like because of methanol fuel, you couldn't see the flames.
Mm-mm.
So when he got out of the car, he just started rolling around on the ground. You could see his suit was burning, and he sustained some bad burns, and he missed a few races. And didn't have a great year. He did win the pole at Atlanta that year, but that was about it. And that was actually the last race at the old Atlanta configuration.
Yep.
So
that is correct. And that, it showed that he had the talent, man. He definitely had the skills to be in NASCAR.
Still his only pole in NASCAR was at Atlanta. And he went back to the kart in 98, 99, ran his own team, went back to NASCAR in 2000, ran his own team. And then he's most known for his most successful stint in NASCAR. He was with RCR from 2001, 2004. He won 3 times, swept the road courses in 2003, started his own team in 2005, which he ran until 2012, and then left NASCAR to found the Stadium Super Trucks, which he still owns, operates, and races in to this day. If you have an opportunity to go to an event where Stadium Super Trucks is on the bill, buy a ticket. It's worth the price of admission just to watch those trucks, and everything else is a bonus.
Yeah, he's done a really great job creating that series. And of course, in homage to Mickey Thompson and his Stadium Super Truck series, that was basically the whole premise of it, was like just going off that. And, you look back at 97, his rookie year, it's very interesting, after even talking with Wally Dallenbach when we had our podcast with him, how much Sabco had a plan with Robbie to be full-time in the 40 car, and Robbie was going to be the staple driver. Then Wally came on and had the 46 car, and then they brought Joe Nemechek on with the Bell South car, and I feel like that kind of stretched the team a little too thin with resources, because there were times where those cars just were not competitive on some of the bigger tracks, and he failed to qualify for races because of that, which is a shame. But Robbie Gourd, man. Let's talk about Robbie's best friend at times. Tony Stewart, man. Tony Stewart.
Smoke.
The first person on this list from the Indy Racing League. That's right. It's not kart. It's like, I am Indy. Yeah. Anyways, Tony Stewart is an IRL champion. Oh, you know what you're saying, man?
I said it was Car's arch nemesis. I was just being a dick.
It makes me think back to like that outside the line story from when they had the war, the first 96, the first US 500.
Oh yes. Oh my God, you have to watch that on YouTube.
That's such a good episode of
documentary. It's what's it called? 500 Miles Apart. Is what it's called.
No,
it's so good.
I would recommend that, but like before you watch that, look up the Outside the Lines episode. It's on YouTube as well. It's from ESPN. It was like their whole like investigative story about that in that time period.
No, that's really what it is. It's called, and it's a special. It's called 500 Miles Apart. Yeah.
Oh, it is? Oh yeah, that's right.
By Outside the Lines.
Okay.
Yeah. And Jimmy Vassar and his whole like, we don't need milk type deal.
Oh man, and Robbie Gordon Robbie Gordon was mic'd up at a point too. I think he was talking with his car owner. He's like, we all look like idiots now. It's like,
they all crash coming to the green. It's great.
Highly recommend.
Yeah, Tony Stewart, James.
Yeah, smoke.
IRL champion.
USAC Triple Crown winner as well in 1995. Of course, 1996. He was what IndyCar was trying to do with IRL. Take grassroots racers, give them the opportunity to jump into the bigger cars, go to the bigger tracks, of course, an oval series. The inaugural champion of that series from 96, 97, that split year. In 97, actually in 96, he actually made his first ever Busch Series start. And then after that, he signed with Joe Gibbs Racing and then began running part-time in the Xfinity Series. He shared a car with Bobby Labonte, almost won a race at Rockingham, got edged out at the line by Matt Kenseth. But Joe Gibbs knew he had a talent, moved him up to Cup with sponsor Home Depot in 1999, which everyone knows is one of the most iconic combinations: Tony Stewart, Home Depot, Joe Gibbs Racing. And of course, can't forget Greg Zipadelli. I mean, he was a really great key to Tony's success. He understood Tony, he knew what he wanted, and he reined smoke back in because he was a bit rough around the edges. Throughout his career, though, he won 3 championships, 2 with Gibbs. He started his own team back in 2009. He won a championship with his own team as well back in 2011. I was there to witness that. My first ever NASCAR race I ever got to shoot with a vest as a licensed photographer. That was really great to see that whole thing play out, being in the media center, and you feel the tension. Everyone just watching Carl Edwards and Tony Stewart battle it out. Of course, we all know him now as more of the owner. He stepped back into that role after he retired. He's also started the SRX series now. And he's also won a championship with Kevin Harvick too in the Cup Series. So well-rounded driver turned owner. Makes me think a lot about AJ Foyt. You know, he definitely resembles his hero very well. And I would say he was one of those drivers that, much like a Jeff Gordon, which we don't mention on this list because he really didn't race an open wheel car on asphalt, but he came up through dirt and then had his time in IndyCar, but saw this opportunity in NASCAR and took well advantage of it. But makes me think what could have been if Tony Stewart would have went to F1, man. That would have been crazy to see him as our American representative in Formula One instead of like Michael Andretti.
Yeah, that would have been weird, especially coming from IRL where they only run ovals.
Mm-hmm.
But he was so good on road courses in NASCAR. Yeah. He was amazing.
He was dominant at Watkins Glen, went several years winning consecutively, and just he even won in the COT. He won the first race, I believe, the COT at Watkins Glen too. So he could win in anything over there. And of course, did the infamous seat swap. He did get a chance to run a Formula One car. Did that with Lewis Hamilton, I believe, in 2011. Did the seat swap.
It was a Mobil One thing, right? I think.
Yep.
Yeah, they were both sponsored by Mobil One.
Yeah.
Yeah, Watkins Glen.
That was pretty cool, though. He got to, I think, at that time he was driving for McLaren, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yep, McLaren. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, pretty good equipment to get to be behind the wheel of, for smoke, much like Jeff Gordon running with Williams back in 2003. At that time, Williams was a top tier F1 team. And at this time, McLaren was, and Hamilton was that rookie that everyone loved. I mean, come on, who couldn't love Lewis Hamilton when he first came out, like back in 2007?
You don't like Lewis Hamilton now. I don't know what's wrong with you because he's amazing. And,
you're
he's a great guy.
You'll miss him when he's gone, man,
That's the thing. You don't know what you got till it's gone. Now, moving into the 2000s, we're going to talk about Casey Mears next. Now, Casey Mears obviously has the Mears name. He's nephew of, Rick Mears, of course. And he spent the late 90s, early 2000s trying to make it as an IndyCar driver. He did run 4 seasons of Indy Lights. He won a race at Houston in 2000, but his IndyCar career lasted just 3 races. Did not qualify for the Indy 500 that year either, which is kind of a bummer. 2002, he went Busch Series racing with Jessel Racing. And despite having 2 career top 10 finishes in the Busch Series, he went to Cup full time in 2003 with Chip Ganassi Racing, which like at the time was a move that people were like, what? This is crazy. And to be honest, he was really not great his first year and then really picked it up in 2004, became a serviceable NASCAR driver and had 16 full-time seasons in NASCAR. He drove for Chip Ganassi Racing, Hendrick, RCR, Germain Racing, and he won his only Cup race in 2007 at the Coke 600, driving for Hendrick Motorsports. So Casey Mears.
A fun fact about him, his first ever stock car start was in an ARCA race, 2001 at Talladega. Talk about jumping in to the deep end. And I always remember him remember MTV Cribs?
I do remember MTV Cribs. This is where the magic happens every time they open the bedroom door. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Anyways, he was on there, and there was a moment where I think he's like in his man cave or something, and he has this one photo. I believe it's an Indy Lights photo where he wrecked real hard, and it's just like crazy. And it's like, yep, that's how I remember my IndyCar career. It's like, oh, Casey Mears. Next up, we're going to talk about another very interesting jump into NASCAR for an open wheel driver. This is AJ Allmendinger. He's a humdinger. In the mid 2000s, we know that there was the IndyCar invasion, or just open wheel invasion. And Mark loves to talk about it because he just loves the fact that these open wheel guys just all flocked to NASCAR, and not just flocked to NASCAR. They all flocked to the Cup Series too. Didn't even like go run Xfinity or anything full time. They just all went to Cup.
Yeah, they were chasing money, man.
Well, also too,
you got paid way more to drive in NASCAR than you did in IndyCar at that point. So
not only that too, but with going to the Cup, it's much like that Steve Kenser thing. It's like you don't want to go down a notch. You want to stay at the top level. So that's another thing too. And to be quite honest, it hurt several of these drivers on the list. And it honestly might have stunted AJ's development in NASCAR, but he did go on and still does have a really great career today. But moving back and looking in his past, 2006 was really a big season for AJ in Champ Car. That was when he just came in and just dominated, running for Root Sport and Forsyth Racing. He won 5 races, narrowly missed out winning the championship, was a Red Bull back driver, and he just made this unfathomable thought to join Red Bull Racing in their debut season with a debut manufacturer. And you just knew it wasn't going to go well. Unfortunately,
the first season of the COT.
Yeah, as the thing, first season with a new car.
They're going to run 2 different cars.
Mm-hmm.
Like, terrible idea.
And that's the thing. He missed the first 4 races of that season. Ironically, the first race he made was with the COT car, but that was at Bristol. Talk about trial by fire right there. First race is you're at Bristol, and it was pretty bad. He only qualified for 17 out of the 36 races that season. Red Bull really just didn't have their motor program going up to par. AJ was not really connecting with a stock car that well. I mean, he didn't have that much experience. You can only test so much. You could not test at NASCAR tracks that NASCAR ran at, though. So that was another thing too. And it really just hurt him in his development. Like we said, he was unfortunately fired by fax from what I remember hearing about with Red Bull. Like they sent him a fax and like, you're fired. So that was a unfortunate falling out, though. He landed on his feet, jumping over to Richard Petty Motorsports, and then was over there when they had the merger with Evernham. So he stayed around in the program for a bit there. And then I would say he really got that breakthrough shot when he got that ride with Penske for that season. Unfortunately, got busted for failing NASCAR's substance abuse policy and failing a drug test. So he was out of the ride. But, with that came another opportunity with the captain. He made an Indy 500 start, was running great. I believe his belts came loose while he was leading the race. Super unfortunate circumstance right there. And then, came back into NASCAR full-time with JTG Geordie Racing, went on to win at Watkins Glen, capturing his only Cup Series victory. He's also won in the Xfinity Series for Roger Penske, and of course now racing with Colleague Racing full-time. He's won as a part-time driver last season and looks great this season too. So it's good to see that AJ, he didn't fall victim to the flock. A lot of the flock members came in and they barely lasted a season, whether it was an injury, poor performances, or just, wanting to save their career and not be known as the failure in NASCAR. AJ pushed on and he made the most of it. And he made a really great career out of it and still going today. So great job for AJ Allmendinger. And he also won the 24 Hours of Daytona with Michael Shank Racing. So very diverse driver as well.
And next up, we got to talk about Michael McDowell, but he wasn't always Michael McDowell. He used to go by Mike McDowell. Back when he was racing in Star Mazda, when he was working his way up the road to Indy. Go check out our interview with Brad Coleman, because he talks a lot about this, how he had to compete with Michael McDowell every week and he just smoked everyone. So Michael McDowell, there's some old Star Mazda races on YouTube too, where you can see Michael McDowell just smoking people at like Lime Rock Park and Sebring and stuff. He worked his way all the way up to Champ Car. He only made a couple Champ Car starts at the end of 2005. But technically he was in IndyCar before he was in NASCAR, because he made those Champ Car starts. He did some Grand Am road racing in 2006 and then decided to go to stock cars, but he did it the right way. He went to ARCA first. So he went to ARCA. He drove with Eddie Sharp's team in 2007 in the Toyota. He won a bunch of races. He was very close to winning the championship.
Yeah,
and then
second to
near the end of that year, for second to Frank Kimmel, and he signed on with Michael Waltrip Racing as a development driver. And then Michael Waltrip Racing announced he was going to race in the Cup Series in 2008. David Rudimen was going to run the first 5 races in the 00, and then McDowell was going to take over. And of course, he's known for having that qualifying crash at Texas. That was the big highlight of his rookie season there. And his rookie season in Cup didn't go very well with Michael Waltrip Racing. Ended up getting taken out of the ride, replaced with Mike Skinner and some other drivers. Just wasn't ready to go to Cup yet. But then he spent some, tumultuous years racing for some smaller Xfinity Series teams. He drove for Gigi Jordi. He drove for Brian Keselowski's team for a while and actually ran really well. He had some finishes in the top 10 at some really tough racetracks like Iowa, Bristol. And then, he landed with Levine Family Racing in the Cup Series. Then he ran with Front Row. And now, of course, we all know he's a Daytona 500 champion. So
Journeyman,
McDowell, man.
Yeah, I remember reading an article in 2011 about during this darker period of his career where he didn't really know what was going on. He lost the full-time Cup ride. And he was, like you're saying, making those starting parks or just, running for these smaller teams. And he's like, I make $1 million, but I make it the hard way. He did everything himself, from driving the motor coach to the track and basically skipping by. And yeah, it's making $1 million, but he's not a millionaire by any means. He's putting that all back into his family and trying to pursue a racing efforts. And it's really great to see that it actually paid off for him eventually. And he's even been running really good this season. So really great to see that out of him in 2021. Next up, this is a man that needs your damn respect, so you better give it to him. It's Juan Pablo Montoya, JPM. Yes, that's right. And don't diss him because he likes to fly his model planes. It's a nice hobby. Keeps his mind fresh and clear. Now, JPM, he's got definitely the wildest path going into NASCAR, because if there was anyone from the flock that was the most notable or just biggest surprise, it was Juan Pablo Montoya. I remember back in 2006 when they announced that Juan was going to come to NASCAR. And it was huge. It was at Chicagoland. And that story, when it broke, it kind of overshadowed the race. It was a big deal. And Juan was there and it was huge. So now Juan started, his automobile career in America running kart in the late 90s. He ran for Chip Ganassi Racing. And of course, the iconic Chip Ganassi Racing Target colors with those yellow lightning bolts, and gave Chip Ganassi an Indy 500 win in 2000. From there, he went on to F1, racing with Williams, when Williams was definitely a powerhouse team. He ended up winning 7 Grand Prix, including the prestigious Monaco Grand Prix back in 2003. He moved to McLaren in 2005, which, was all right, but midway through the 2006 season, he announced that he would leave and, of course, go to NASCAR in 2007. Now, Juan did the development right. Throughout 2006, Ganassi put him in ARCA races. They put him in Xfinity races, trying to get as much experience for him before he had to make his debut. And in 2007, he started out great. He had a lot of good success early on. I remember him running top 5 at Atlanta early in the season.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And I think he
4th or 5th.
Yeah, he had a really great run. I think that he wasn't in the Haviland car. He was actually in the Wrigley's car maybe at that time. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that, but I always remember that. Now, Juan did go on to win a race. He went on to win Sonoma later that season with the COT. That'd be his first ever Cup Series victory. From there, season kind of fizzled. He did ended up winning Rookie of the Year honors, but beyond that, it just didn't pan out. He finished 20th in points. And for the next couple seasons, he became a staple in NASCAR, but he wasn't the ultra competitive driver. I'd say 2010 was his best season by far. Well, I believe 2010, he made the chase, and he was running really well. Looked like he could finish top 5 in points possibly until his chase kind of fell apart at Charlotte. He had some damage, and then from there, just finishes weren't as consistent as they were in the initial start of that 10-race stretch. Though he would go on to win another race in 2013 at Watkins Glen.
2010, he won at Watkins Glen.
Was it 2010? I thought he won in the COT. Oh, no, he didn't win in the COT. You're right. Or was it 2010 or 2011?
I think it was 2010 in the Target car.
I was in the Target car. I just want to double check. Because, I don't know if it had a wing on it or a spoiler.
I think it still had the wing on it.
Pablo Montoya. Our favorite person to go see at Merriam's is Juan Pablo Montoya. Yep, 2010, he won at Watkins Glen. So, back when they had the wing on the car. I remember there was a splitter, but I couldn't remember if there was a wing or a spoiler. So, back 2011, 2010, he won his final Cup race. And something that people like to nag on him about is the fact that he never won an oval. Everyone should shut up. He was super competitive on ovals. Okay, it wasn't like he was out to lunch and never had a chance and didn't contend.
He was going to win that Brickyard 400. Was it 09?
I swear on my kids that I wasn't speeding. 09, yep. And
he was going to win that race till he got screwed.
Even in 2010, he was doing great. And obviously his teammate went on to win it. And him and Jamie were running 1-2 that entire day. I remember that. So now Juan didn't just hang it up after he left NASCAR. He would actually return to IndyCar, but for the captain, Roger Penske. Oh, that's like going to the enemy, Mark. It's like going from, the force to the dark side. And, no offense, but he picked going to a winning organization in IndyCar racing, because he would go on to win the 2015 Indy 500. 15 years after he won his first one, comes back, first start, wins it. Amazing. Juan Pablo Montoya never gets enough credit. He still races in sports cars to this day. Juan, we'd love to see you back in a stock car at some point. I don't care if it's SRX or anything. It'd be great to see him back in a NASCAR. And, people need to give Juan Montoya more respect for his efforts in NASCAR.
He's one of the best race car drivers of all time.
To me. Yeah, definitely one of the best of our generation too.
For sure. To go from F1 to NASCAR, be successful in both, and then run NASCAR for, 8 years, and then just get up and get in an IndyCar again and win the Indy 500 again. He's going to run the Indy 500 again this year with McLaren. He's racing. He won the IMSA championship in 2019 in an Acura DPI for Team Penske. And now he's racing in the World Endurance Championship in LMP2, Dragon Speed, because he's trying to win Le Mans. He wants that Le Mans win to go with his Monaco Grand Prix and his Indy 500, right? Yeah. So he's an amazing driver. And, there's a lot of great open wheel drivers like on this list, obviously. And the next one we have to talk about is Sam Hornish Jr. So I actually forgot about Sam Hornish until the end. I was like, oh yeah, Sam Hornish. That's right. He was an IndyCar driver, because I know him more. He raced more NASCAR in his career than he did IndyCar. If you do the numbers, right?
If you do the numbers, yes. But I think also too, no offense to our age, but we really didn't watch Sam Hornish in his prime in IndyCar, because that was the thing. Most people forget that, when Sam Hornish was dominating IndyCar, it was still a primarily oval series. And, he was, I think, most notably known for winning the most closest races in IndyCar history. If you ever look at races, Chicago, Texas, where he won, it's almost by a wing or a few inches. They're so thrilling to watch. Highly recommend those. But yeah, people forget about the fact that Sam ran with Panther Racing for several seasons and won, I believe, 3 championships in IndyCar.
I think he won 2 with Panther, and then he won his 3rd with Team Penske in 2006. Also won the Indy 500 that year.
Closest Indy 500 finish in history.
Yeah, just beat Marco Andretti to the line by a nose. And he ran some Busch races at the end of 06. He ran at Phoenix and Homestead. I remember watching them. He did very poorly in both. But, it was his first couple starts. 2007, ran a partial schedule while still running full-time in IndyCar. And it was announced midway through 07 that he was going to go full-time when Penske's 3rd Cup car. They were going to bring the 77 back, and Hornish was going to run. Got off to a really rough start, though. They wanted to put him in some Cup races at the end of 07. He failed to qualify for his first 6 races. Finally made one at Phoenix. 2008, they did a little point swap to make sure Hornish would be locked in. So because Kurt Busch could use his Champions Provisional at the time. So they swapped him around. Really struggled through 3 seasons in Cup. He did have a couple strong top 5 finishes. He ran well at Pocono and some of the races in the summer. And then in 2011, they moved him down to their Xfinity Series program, and he finally won his first race at Phoenix in the fall of that year. Ran full-time in 2012 and 2013 in Xfinity and fought for the championship both years. He finished, I believe, 2nd and 3rd in points those years. And then he returned to Cup racing again in 2015 with Rich Petty Motorsports, went full-time, just ran the 1 season. And then in 2016 and 2017, he went back down to Xfinity part-time, ran for Gibbs, won a race at Iowa out of nowhere. Then he ran with RCR. And then in 2017, I got to see him win his last Xfinity race in Mid-Ohio. And he started on pole, led the most laps, won the race. So he was super competitive right up until the end. I think in his final Xfinity race, he finished 2nd. And then we haven't seen him since.
Yeah,
so I don't know what Sam Hornish is up to.
He went out on top, and I think that's probably the best thing for him. But it was just unfortunate the fact that I feel like he kind of came up the right way, not just jumping into Cup. He tried to spend a couple of seasons running some Xfinity races, but this was also at the time when the car swapping over to the COT was a very big challenge. But also, I think we all remember back when the All-Star race happened. He won the Open. And then that car was just yawed out so bad, but he drove it. He could wheel a car, so you got to give it up to Sam Hornish. And he's super competitive. He got a good ride. He could always make the most of it, and he showcased that. Next up, the only Canadian on the list, Patrick Carpentier. That's right. Now, Patrick Carpanier, known as the kart driver throughout the 90s and early 2000s, he did do 1 season of IRL in 2005. But out of nowhere, he started getting his feet wet in NASCAR around 2007. And he actually made the inaugural Busch race that was at Montreal in 2007 as well. He won the pole and finished 2nd for Fitz Bradshaw Motorsports. Actually, it's Fit Motorsports at this time because get the Bradshaw out of there. We don't need that drama.
That was his first ever race. Won the pole.
And home race too. So he was considered a ringer at that race, but he wanted to take NASCAR seriously. He saw an opportunity. He would go on to then make his Cup Series debut the next week with Evernham, and then make his debut the next season as a full-time driver for Evernham in the number 10 with Valvoline behind him back when they had the Valvoline sponsorship with Evernham. And it was a very eclectic season. He didn't really have the best of luck at times. He would go on and win a pole, I believe, at New Hampshire. That was his highlight. I also remember in 2007, he tried to make some races for Bill Davis Racing and actually made some truck races as well as part of his development. But with Evernham, he only ran the 1 season, but he never actually ran it because he was released. So he made it about halfway through, and that was his only full-time opportunity. Over the next couple of years, he would spend several starts over the next couple of years, he'd make several starts in the Xfinity Series, running with Michael Waltrip Racing, Penske Racing, and Braun Racing, having a lot of success, but ultimately never capturing a NASCAR victory. It's something that has eluded him. And it was something that was odd because he was a ringer too at this period during his part-time era, making starts at Road America, Montreal, and Watkins Glen. But Patrick Carpanier, very interesting person to jump into NASCAR and would have never expected him to want to come to NASCAR.
Yeah, and he is the only Canadian on this list. If you're wondering where Jacques Vilnov and Alex Tagliani are, they're not on this list because they never tried to run full-time in NASCAR, so we didn't include them. And these later.
Oh yeah, Jacques
ringers.
Jacques was the driver who ran with Bill Davis Racing.
Yeah, I was thinking you were thinking of Jacques. Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, it was
supposed to run full-time in NASCAR, but it didn't work out.
Funding never came about for that organization. I remember he had UNICEF on the car, and I'm like, that's UNICEF. UNICEF ain't paying no money to be on that car.
No.
That is
not a dime. They ran number 27, which was sick because that was just like classic number. And Tags has like almost won so many NASCAR races, just like heartbreaking for that guy. Like Regan Smith stole that win from him at Mid-Ohio, but I'd have done the same thing. I'd have dumped him.
And Tags was another guy too, much like Jacques and Carpentier. When we were watching Xfinity Series throughout the 2010s, we would enjoy their participation as ringers. They really added a lot to their races, a lot of drama, more or less, because towards the end they would always be using their bumpers, but it was always entertaining to watch them compete against.
And they were always in good cars. That was the thing. They were in cars that could win. So that's why they were really exciting to watch.
And if anything, they always elevated the performances of the other drivers that were there. Even a guy like Max Pappas, because like Max was the kind of guy, I can't believe we forgot Max Pappas on this list. But like Max was the kind of guy who would always coach and try to teach, give some of his secrets towards these drivers so they can help be better road course racers. And I feel like we have more diverse and well-rounded drivers in NASCAR today because of the participation of these top tier open wheel drivers in the mid 2010s and early 2010s.
Oh, agreed. Next up, we have the coolest name in all of motorsports. It's Mr. Dario Franchitti. Also the best hair in all of motorsports. Oh,
he's got the best hair. And don't forget the best.
I think he doesn't put product in it. I don't buy it. He's got to have product in it. That can't just be, can't just be.
He's a really great announcer too, man. Like if you ever watch a Formula E race.
I was going to say, he does Formula E. Is amazing.
Oh, yeah. I love hearing his voice. It's just like his Scottish accent and just the way he talks and enunciates things. It's like listening to Australian announcers when they're talking supercars or GT racing. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's great. Like he's an amazing announcer. He's actually Jimmy Johnson's driver coach now at Chip Ganassi Racing, which is really cool. He has a role there with the team, but Dario's known for being in kart and then later on the IRL through the late 90s, early 2000s. He rode for Team Green and Andretti Green Racing. He won the Indy 500 and the IRL championship in 2007 and then hung up his IndyCar gloves and was like going to NASCAR. So he won the championship and then bailed. So he's like, I'm going to drive for Chip Ganassi, Andretti's rival in NASCAR. So goes to NASCAR in 08. He did, now like Montoya, he did some like ARCA and Busch at the end of 07 and, but he didn't show the flashes of brilliance that Montoya did. He drove the number 40 Dodge in 2008. They had about 1 million different sponsors that year because they didn't have a full season sponsor. They had Dodge Journey on it. I remember they had Target, they had Guitar Hero. They had 1 million different sponsors on the car. And after 7 starts, he was injured in a crash at Talladega in the nationwide race. He got Gunselmaned by Mr. Larry Gunselman, unfortunately. And he actually broke his leg in that crash. Missed a bunch of races. He did return to make 3 more starts in Cup, but was eventually replaced just due to poor results. He actually failed to qualify at Sonoma, which was kind of like a not great. Like they were expecting him to do well at that road course. He did continue to race in nationwide the rest of the year. He won the pole at Watkins Glen. I believe he led like 80 laps at Bristol, I think, in the night race. He ran really well in that race. And then went back to IndyCar in 2009 with Chip Ganassi, and he won 2 more Indy 500s and 3 more IndyCar championships. So
he was a part of the flock, man. I mean, he saw Montoya coming in and he saw Montoya have success. He wanted to try something different. It's the thing of like, I've conquered this series. What can I do next? And, that's to me the mentality he had. And that injury he had at Talladega, I feel like that unfortunately was something that would later on bug him because he would re-injure his legs at Dallas in a horrifying accident, went up into the catch fence on the street course. And that would unfortunately be a career-ending incident for him. He's never been back in a race car in a competitive race for competition since. So, but like Mark said, he's still finding a way to be involved, especially with like Chip Ganassi Racing. And like I said, he's great commentator, well-rounded dude. Can't not like Dario Franchitti.
One added fun fact, apparently he was like asked by Ray Evernham to join the Dodge program in the early 2000s. Because apparently there was a lot of like poaching of IndyCar drivers at that point. I remember Jimmy Vasser almost went to Chip Ganassi's NASCAR team.
Yeah.
So apparently he was asked to be involved in that, and also had meetings with RCR in the mid 2000s about going to NASCAR. So I guess it was something he wanted to do for a while.
Yeah.
He finally went and did it in 08.
And that's the thing. A lot of these people, like, you just don't jump to NASCAR for a publicity stunt. You generally want to do it. And now we'll move on to this driver, Danica Patrick. Danica Patrick, we all know her as, of course, the first female driver to ever lead laps at the Indy 500 and have a top 5. She showcased her talents well when she moved up into IndyCar, ran a couple seasons, but then there was this rumor mill around 2006, 2007. Oh, what's Danica going to do? Is she coming to NASCAR? I don't know. Oh, is Danica coming to NASCAR? Well, she won one IndyCar race at Twin Ring Motegi. Unfortunately, nobody saw it because it was on ESPN Classic live at 9:00 at night. I was watching it. It was kind of cool. But beyond that, she made the jump to NASCAR, which was...
And so that was the final IRL race, James. You forgot that fun fact. That was the final IRL race before the merger.
They joined forces again, so which is good to see. I'm glad everyone buried the hatchet there between CART and IndyCar. Unfortunately, we killed CART, but it's all good. We're all unified now. Danica went to NASCAR, and a lot of people looked at this as kind of a publicity stunt. She had a lot of funding behind her. She was working with GoDaddy for quite some time before making the jump to NASCAR, and GoDaddy even sponsored her IndyCar. She appeared in several Super Bowl ads for the company. So she was the face of that brand. And with GoDaddy, she was able to make the jump to NASCAR. She actually ran in the Xfinity Series part-time for a few seasons, running with JRM. Didn't really have a lot of success. She did make she had a top 5 finish at Las Vegas, I believe in 2011, if I'm not mistaken, 2011. And she would then go on to make her some partial Cup Series starts when she signed a deal with Stewart Haas Racing with the ambitions of going full-time. She would go full-time, race several seasons, never really had the success and results I believe she could have had. She had a lot of strong runs, just never could put the races together. Things would happen. And, that's just Danica's career in a nutshell. She would bookend her career making a final start in the Daytona 500 and a final start in the Indy 500, and unfortunately wrecked out of both of those events. But still, we got to talk about Danica because she's so influential with bringing the next generation of female drivers up, because she was a face for a lot of female drivers in this country to showcase, hey, I can make it. I can be that face. And at first there was a lot of the stereotypical things going on where, obviously you got to sell yourself a little bit to make it ahead in life. And I think with Danica, she's really shown today is she can be an entrepreneur, and that, you don't just have to go down the same old path. You can make your way and, have success, and you just have to look at it with a glass half full perspective. And, she's a really good ambassador for female drivers, and people need to just stop hating on her too. So give Danica Patrick a lot more respect too.
Danica served her purpose in NASCAR. She really did. She brought sponsors into the sport. She gave hope to a whole generation of young female race car drivers. And, there's such an argument against people like Danica being in the sport. Well, she's not good. She's only here for marketing. Who cares? It's about being marketable. That's a big part of it, and girls are never going to get involved in racing if they can't look at racing and see someone that looks like them.
Exactly.
It's hard. And you say the same thing with people of color, like what Bubba Wallace does now. It's like it's amazing. You have, young kids growing up saying, wow, but he looks like me. I can do that. It's not, and it's great for the sport. So she served her purpose. Yeah, she only had 7 career top 10s in, I think it was 6 seasons she ran, or 3 to 17, 5 seasons. So yeah, like not great, but I wish she'd run one more year of Xfinity. She'd run one more year of Xfinity, because that 2012 season, she would have won that race in Montreal if she didn't run over that shoe.
Yeah, that was a really weird circumstances there. And even Kelly Earnhardt Miller has expressed that she wishes Danica would have stayed around and run at least one full season of Xfinity, because it would have really helped with her development. She would have learned a lot more, and it just doesn't hurt to spend that time in the Xfinity series. And I feel like if anything was really learned from Danica's, entry into the sport, is that you should really take the time to develop and, hone the skill and then move up the ladder. Of course, you can't stop if there's an opportunity. Just because GoDaddy's like, oh, we're not happy in the Xfinity series, we want to move you up to Cup, and Danica has to say yes to that, doesn't mean Danica's a bad person for saying yes to that. It means she has to make that decision to keep that sponsor happy. And, to that other point about the marketing, it's not like her or even Bubba Wallace chooses to be that face. Unfortunately, they're the only face of that kind of representation that's in the sport. And when you're that only face, NASCAR is just going to plaster you everywhere, because that's all NASCAR has to showcase that. And even during this time period, I believe, who was it? Johanna Long competed against her in the Xfinity series. And a lot of people were saying Johanna Long deserves her ride. Johanna Long is a better driver. I have to agree, but Johanna Long's experience is only in stock cars. So it doesn't hurt when you're jumping up the ladder to, from stock cars to stock cars, where she's jumping from IndyCar with the tires twice as wide and the cars half as light.
Half as much.
That weighs half as much. And then she's jumping in the stock car with the tires half as wide, weighs twice as much, So that's another thing too. And that's another thing that's lost here, to your point with the marketing. You would expect that Danica being in there would have helped drivers like Johanna Long, and it didn't. And it's a shame. And I don't blame Danica at all for that. You got to blame corporate America. Corporate America could see Johanna Long and they could be like, wow, let's get behind her. But they didn't, Yes, Danica was a more
Danica had the name power, right? She had that name recognition from her time in IndyCar. And speaking of IndyCar, she's going to pace the field for the Indy 500 this year.
That's good.
Patrick. So
good for her.
She's got experience leading laps there, so it makes sense.
Yeah, her whole kind of rise up makes me think a lot of Jeff Gordon, where Jeff's stepdad really groomed him to be this face and to be marketable and to be, a figure. And that's kind of what Danica did. And it's that's part of the game. You have to be a figure as well as being a competitive driver. And it's not like she wasn't competitive at all. Hell, I mean, people forget the fact that her teammate died in her first ever IndyCar start. She had to go into that race knowing that her teammate died.
They abandoned the race. They didn't. The team didn't race.
Yeah.
Ray Hall sat the race out. So
and
she didn't even get to run that race at Homestead.
And that was out of respect, but she had to go through that season. Dang, this is real. And to that point, she drove for some pretty prolific car owners. Of course, Tony Stewart, Dale Earnhardt Jr., and the Andrettis in her final year in IndyCar, and then of course, the Ray Hall Letterman team. So she's had a good shot at some good equipment, and she's made the most out of it too in some situations. So that's our list for this one. It's a good list.
Yeah,
except we forgot Max Pappas, but.
Yeah, we didn't include Max.
Sorry,
that's
Max.
My bad.
We love you, dude.
Didn't even think of Max.
Don't punch me. I know you can punch people.
Max Pappas, silver rated driver now, by the way, because he turned 50. So,
happy
if you
birthday,
need an
Max.
extra driver for an endurance race for your IMSA team, call Max Pappas because he's a silver. Miss Max. If there's any others you think we missed, let us know. You can chirp us on social media.
I just remembered, man.
You can leave a comment below.
Scott Pruitt.
So I didn't include Scott because we talked about him at length in the last episode, the rookies episode. So I didn't include Scott because of that.
Got to talk about Scott.
We talked well enough about Scott after that, so did not include Scott.
Yeah, but if anything, to point out about Scott, he could have been the first influential of the flock, to your point about how even Dodge in 2001 wanted to bring on Vassar and Franchini. Pruitt was probably that hey man, these IndyCar guys aren't that bad. You just got to groom them and make sure they can understand what the stock car is like.
But Let us know if you think we missed any. Yeah, we didn't include all the ringers. We would have been here for hours on end. So fun though. Fun to look back at this. I wanted to talk about this for a while, and we're going to do something similar again for next week. Next week's Indy 500 week. So we're going to try and we're going to talk about some more IndyCar and NASCAR drivers, but we won't give away what we're going to chat about, but it's going to be good. Also, we need to find out who, James, we're giving your shirt away, your Nemechek shirt. So we should have done that first. So we need to announce who the winner of that is. So you have to be following us on Twitter and following Blue Emu. I'm going to go back and find the entries into our thing here. Let me just, come on.
We're picking a name out of a hat. That's what we're really doing.
Buried under here. You gotta have to tell us your favorite strange starter. We've got Jeremy. I
want to hear some of these options. Here's how we're gonna pick it.
Okay.
Ready? All right. Okay. I remember a lot of the ones that were listed, but I don't remember who listed them. So I'll let Mark just list them off, and I'm gonna pick my favorite. And that's who's gonna win.
The strange starters that were given were Morgan Shepherd driving the last Stavola Brothers race in 1998 at Atlanta, crashed out while finishing 6th. Then we got Hideo Fukuyama driving at Martinsville in 2002.
I would have liked it if someone would have mentioned Dover for him.
We've got Nelson Piquet Jr. in 2014 driving the Cup race at the Glen for Randy Humphrey in the 77 Ford.
Yeah, that was after he called.
Someone just said Landon Castle.
I heard that, and that's the obvious one. And I'm sorry, Landon, I'm not going to pick you. I'm sorry.
Someone said Dick Carth driving in Road America in 2019. He only made 4 races in ARCA and Xfinity combined, all in the state of Wisconsin. Then we've got Klaus Graf at Sonoma in 2004, driving the second BAM racing car, the 59 SEM Dodge. And then we've got Landon Castle driving the 81 GoDaddy truck for Randy Moss Motorsports.
Moss. That's a good one.
Straight cash, homie. Straight cash. What are you going with, man?
You know what I really like? I like the Morgan Shepherd one because of the context of it. The fact that it's a Stavola Brothers team, and Stavola Brothers were a staple for quite some time. And Morgan was really good at Atlanta. So for him to be running that well is great, but it's a shame that he didn't get the finish. And also, this is probably that time period when Morgan started to get those, odder rides. So I'm going to go with Morgan Shepherd because this is probably the time period when he became a strange starter. In our context of strange starters.
The winner is Chris Mitchell. Chris is actually the first guy to ever listen to our podcast, which is really ironic. So
hey,
he's one of the only guys ever used to reply to us. So Chris, you won. I'm actually just going to tweet you right now as well to let you know that you won. Please DM us your shipping information, and James will send that out post haste.
Yeah, and it'll include a little bit of a blue emu. So congratulations, Chris. You're going to get yourself a sick crew shirt and some continuous spray from Blue Emu. So, and also thank you so much for being a dedicated listener, man. Since episode 1, I've seen his name pop up on social media too, interacting with our content, and it's great to see that we're getting a nice little cult following behind us, like we're the Big Lebowski or something. Maybe in 10 years will be something to talk about. But it's great that a lot of our listeners, you've been listening to us for over a year now. We're almost going into year 3 with this. It's kind of going into year 2 now. Actually, think about it. We're on the 2nd season, but
yeah, I think we're going to be at like 2 years come, I want to say June or July.
Yeah. And we started doing this before the pandemic. Okay. So
yeah, we were going to podcast like a few months before the pandemic started. So
we were about a year before the pandemic. And I think honestly,
no, it was like August of like 2019, I think, when we started. Yes. And then we took like a long hiatus randomly. We'd have like weeks between. We didn't have a schedule. We were busy, so we'd have like weeks between episodes and like.
Yeah, and our episodes were like really detailed with like going over the race, and like we were just killing ourselves, just trying to make notes, and also trying to like make a podcast that was a decent listening length, but also one that people would like. And I think we've really found a stride now with like topics and even just bulleting on some stuff. So I think we've gotten better, but I think the biggest thing is like most people who have started a podcast during the pandemic period, you know, they're like, oh, how do I continue doing this after the pandemic? Well, Mark and I have been doing this style of podcast even before the pandemic, just because we live in two different countries. And we're not going to stop doing it this way. I think we've found a good stride with it. It's just about, you know, making sure we're not working or consumed throughout the week so we can actually have the time to just sit down and record the podcast. That's the biggest thing.
And there is going to be an opportunity, hopefully in June. James and I will be at the same race event, and there's a break between the races, James. So hopefully you and I can get together one day that week and record an in-person podcast for the first time since Homestead of 2019. Could you imagine? God, it's going to be too much love to contain. And
I think we did one at Daytona. I'm not sure if we actually put it out though.
We did. Brian Cleary. That's right. We interviewed Brian Cleary.
That was the dopest one. I want to get Brian back on, but like, no offense to our listeners. I always love the audio version of our podcast. I want that to be our bread and butter. We do the YouTube one, and I appreciate our YouTube viewers for checking us out. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. But I really want to do something cool with Brian where we just like have photos and we just like show him the photo and be like, tell us about the situation. What's going on?
That'd be really cool.
That would be so sick. So
I'd love to talk to some other photographers too. It'd be cool to get some other photographers on the podcast that have shot NASCAR.
Nigel
Kinraid is like one of the best like NASCAR photographers ever.
Oh, I want to talk to him about Isle of Man, you know.
Isle of Man. Yeah, he's shot so many cool events, you know, and like there's a lot of guys we could get. Imagine if we got Mike Levitt. Could you imagine?
That man doesn't even have a social media account.
Mike Levitt is everywhere, though. If you've ever watched racing and they show the pit lane, Mike Levitt's there.
Yeah, you'll see
every
Mike
race
Levitt.
on earth. He's there. He's at all of them. He's at every single race ever.
And if you've ever seen a promotional
just check drivers' Instagram stories when they pull out of the pits, Mike will be there. Don't worry. He's wearing the same outfit too in every single video. He's wearing a white shirt.
It's his brand, you know. It's like how I try to wear the pink shirt all the time with my shirt.
He's got his niche, man. He's figured it out.
Yeah.
So,
and it's funny if you ever seen a product shot or a promotional shoot where it's like anything, probably Mike Levitt took that. So
that's the thing. Yeah, if you've ever seen a studio shot of a race car, that was probably taken by Mike Levitt or Rick Dole.
See, people take these photos. You got to give them credit. All right, never forget that. You give credit where credit is due.
If you don't own something,
it's
credit it. We credit stuff. You're bad if you don't credit stuff. Credit stuff. You don't own it. So on that note, folks, we're going to leave you, and we'll be back next week to talk more about IndyCar, NASCAR crossovers for Indy 500 week. So enjoy yourselves and enjoy a weekend of racing at COTA, James. Have fun with that.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, everyone. Hey, if anybody's at COTA, you know, come say hi. We'll talk flashback, talk NASCAR, talk anything, man. Just come say hi. I'm fully vaccinated. Don't have to worry about me. Of course, you all follow that nice protocol, too. Stay 6 feet apart. Keep hand sanitizer in your hands. And make sure if you have any kind of discomfort, pain, and you need maximum strength relief to work into your recovery routine, try Blue Emu. They have a plethora of products from Blue Emu Super Strength, Blue Emu Maximum Strength, Blue Emu Hemp, Blue Emu Continuous Spray, of course, Mark's favorite, Blue Emu Bath Pods. Ooh,
I got to reach out to Wendy because I'm out. I need more bath pods.
I finally got my shipment in, so I'm excited. I got the bath here, so I'm going to actually take a bath tonight and enjoy that. But on that note, that's Mark and James. Man, it was great seeing you. Great conversation. Great script, man. I love this one. This is good.
Fantastic. I'll see you next week.